Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever your story, I want to talk to the man whose name is still whispered at midnight. Maybe she doesn't say it aloud anymore. Maybe she hasn't spoken to you in years. But when the world grows quiet and the clock strikes 12, she remembers. And the question is why? Some of you are here today thinking the past is buried. But let me tell you, the past is not dead. It echoes. And sometimes it echoes in the soft sob of a woman staring at a ceiling, wondering if you ever meant what you said, or if you even remember her at all. Before you scroll away, before you shut off your heart, I want you to hear this truth. The midnight memory is not an accident. It is a summons, a spiritual signal, a divine reminder. And if you'll stay with me for just a few minutes, I promise you this message can change your relationships, your regrets, and even your eternity. She remembers you at midnight because you once meant something. She remembers the laughter, but more than that, she remembers the silence after the goodbye. She remembers how you looked at her, how you listened, or how you stopped listening. At midnight, masks fall away. Pride has gone to bed. The soul stays awake, and she lies there with the memory of what was, or what could have been. Now you might say, but I've moved on. Or, I didn't know she felt that deeply. But God knows. God sees. And I ask you, what kind of man do you want to be remembered as? Because whether you believe it or not, your words mattered, your presence mattered, and your absence was louder than any shouting. She doesn't remember you because she's weak. She remembers you because she loved. And that kind of love leaves a mark on the soul, not just the skin. You may never walk through her door again, but you can walk through the door of repentance. You can send a prayer. You can write a letter. You can ask God to make it right, even if the past cannot be rewritten, because the God who sees midnight also sees the morning. And if she remembers you at midnight, it might be because heaven wants you to remember her. And more than that, remember the man you were and the man you're called to become. If you'd like the full speech written out or formatted for a video or sermon, let me know. I can continue or tailor it further. Midnight is more than a moment on the clock. It is a shadowed threshold where the soul lays bare. In the silence of night, when the laughter fades and the world rolls into sleep, a woman's heart begins to speak. And what it says is not always spoken out loud. It speaks in memory. It speaks in emotion. It speaks in tears that never fall, or in breath that catches unexpectedly. You see, midnight is not just a time. It is a mirror of all that was once beautiful or broken or both. In that hour, there is no distraction, no noise to drown out the truth. The phone is silent, the streets are empty, and what's left is just her and the echo of what you once were to her. Midnight becomes the place where she meets your memory, not because she wants to, but because it comes uninvited. That is the power of love when it has been real, and the wound it leaves when it has been mishandled. You might think she has forgotten, that life has moved her forward and time has wiped the slate clean. But the truth is, time does not always heal. Sometimes it preserves. Sometimes it sanctifies moments so deeply that they return like a whisper in the middle of the night. She remembers your voice, not because it was always kind, but because it once gave her comfort. She remembers the way you walked away, not because she holds a grudge, but because the silence that followed was deafening. Midnight is honest. It has no filter, no pretense. That's why it is dangerous and holy. It's in that hour that God often brings things to the surface we thought we buried. She remembers because her soul hasn't forgotten the impact you made, the words you said in a moment of truth, or the ones you failed to say when she needed them most. She might remember your laughter, your touch, the way you looked at her across a crowded room. But she also remembers the last text you didn't send, the birthday you forgot, the argument you walked away from without resolution, and maybe you didn't mean for it to leave a scar. Maybe you never knew the weight of your presence, but she knew. She felt it. And that's why midnight still carries your name. It's not about blame. It's about gravity, the kind of emotional gravity that only comes when someone mattered deeply. And that kind of mattering does not dissolve when the sun goes down. In fact, it rises with the moon. Midnight holds her hostage in memories she never volunteered for. It calls her back to a place she thought she'd left behind. Because what the heart loves, it keeps. And what it keeps, it remembers. Not just in the daylight where smiles can mask pain, but in the midnight hour when truth knocks on the door of her spirit and says, "He was here, and I still feel the absence where he once stood." A woman's heart is not quick to forget, not because she is weak, but because she is woven differently. Her memory is not just a recollection, it is an imprint, carved deeply into her spirit by moments that mattered. When she remembers you at midnight, it's not always the romantic gestures or the words you said when things were good. More often it's the words you didn't say. The silence after the storm, the hollow space where comfort should have been. Love and pain are not opposites for her. They often arrive together, wrapped in the same memory. And that memory doesn't leave quietly, it lingers. It presses against her when the rest of the world is still. Midnight becomes the hour when emotions buried under strength and distractions rise like a tide. She remembers because her heart once opened to you in trust. She shared her thoughts, her fears, her dreams, and in doing so, she gave you power. Not power to control, but power to influence, to protect, to honor. And if that was violated, intentionally or not, the heart remembers. Not with bitterness always, but with a kind of ache that won't go away. Sometimes it shows up as a name that still triggers a feeling. Sometimes it's a dream she didn't expect to have, a tear she can't explain, a song that turns a regular night into a moment of remembering. Love has a way of marking us. Pain has a way of clarifying what mattered. And when the two meet, it becomes unforgettable. You may not have meant to leave her with these memories. Maybe you never even understood how deeply she felt. But that does not change what was planted. And seeds of love, whether they bloom or break, always leave a trace. She remembers not because she's trapped in the past, but because her heart still carries the weight of what happened. The nights you didn't call, the promises that turned cold, the way you looked at her when she was your whole world, and the way you looked through her when she no longer was. These are not just moments, they are messages. And the heart records everyone. She doesn't stay up at night waiting. She moves forward, she works, she laughs, she builds a life. But then comes midnight, and with it comes the shadow of what was left unresolved. Because when a woman loves fully, she does not simply erase the history. She internalizes it. She carries it in the spaces no one sees. You might be a ghost now, a chapter she doesn't read aloud, but you're still written in ink. You still live in the margins, and no matter how far she has come, some part of her still feels your absence like a bruise she learned to cover but never forgot how she got. That's why she remembers, because your presence once shaped her world, and your absence reshaped it. We live in a world that tells us to move on quickly, to forget what hurts, to act like our choices don't echo beyond the moment. But the truth is, our actions linger. They linger in places we no longer walk, in people we no longer speak to, and in hearts we may have left behind. She remembers you at midnight, not because she hasn't healed, but because healing doesn't erase history. Midnight is when the noise dies down, when the distractions fade and the soul is left alone with what's real. It's in that sacred, quiet hour that memory awakens, not just with nostalgia, but with conviction. It reminds her of what you did, what you said, and maybe most of all, what you didn't say. Because consequences don't disappear just because we choose not to look at them. They remain, and often they live in the people we've touched. You may have told yourself it wasn't that serious, or she'll get over it. But what was light to you may have been heavy to her. What you brushed off may have changed, the way she sees herself or the way she trusts others. When a person gives their heart, it's not just a gesture, it's a surrender. She gave you access to the deepest parts of her identity, and what you did with that access left an imprint. We live in an age that celebrates detachment, that mocks emotion as weakness, but God doesn't. He sees what we plant, and he watches what grows from it. That's why he says, "You will reap what you sow." And midnight is often the hour when the harvest comes, not in the form of punishment, but in the form of awareness. She remembers because your choices had weight. Maybe you left without explanation. Maybe you stayed too long and turned cold. Maybe you promised forever but gave up when it got hard. These things do not disappear with time. Time can bury them, but it also has a way of bringing them back up, especially when the heart is still asking questions. You may not feel the impact anymore. You may have moved on, but her soul still carries the ripple, and at midnight that ripple becomes a wave. She lies there not replaying fairy tales, but wondering what she could have done differently, when perhaps it wasn't her burden to bear in the first place. The truth is, our choices outlive us. They live in someone's diary, in a voicemail never deleted, in a memory that rises when the room goes dark. Midnight is where unfinished stories knock on the door of the soul and ask to be reckoned with. And in that hour, she remembers, not to hold on, but because the imprint you left cannot be undone. Choices create consequences, and those consequences live in human hearts. You may not see the damage, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. Midnight reveals it all. There is no relationship hidden from the eyes of God. Every word spoken in private. Every vow made in soft whispers. Every look, every touch, every moment shared between two hearts. He saw it all. And just as he sees love when it is pure and holy, he also sees the pain when it is misused or neglected. When she remembers you at midnight, it is not only her heart at work. It is often a spiritual stirring, a reminder that what happened between you wasn't just emotional, it was sacred. The weight she still feels, the ache she cannot quite explain, may be the evidence of a deeper truth, that heaven itself witnessed what transpired and still calls out for accountability, or perhaps for healing. We are quick to separate the spiritual from the relational, as if love and God operate in different realms. But that's a lie. God is love. He authored the very idea of intimacy, of connection, of two souls intertwining. So when you enter someone's life, you are not just playing a role in their story, you are stepping onto holy ground. What you do in that space matters to God. The promises you make, the wounds you cause, the silence you allow, these are not neutral acts. They carry spiritual consequence. The tears she cries in secret are not invisible to heaven. The ache she feels at midnight is not forgotten in the divine realm. It matters. You mattered. And what happened between you still matters to God. You might think the relationship was a mistake, that it's over, that you've moved on. But God does not measure time the way we do. He measures the heart. He weighs the intentions. He knows what you meant and what you neglected. He knows when she prayed for you, even when you didn't ask her to. He knows when she fought for the connection, even as it was slipping away. And he knows if you walked away casually from something she considered eternal. That kind of disconnect leaves a scar, not just on the heart, but on the spirit. That's why she remembers you in the deep hours of the night. Her soul is still trying to make sense of what it lived through, and God, who never sleeps, is present in that process. The midnight memory might not just be about missing you. It might be about God nudging her toward release or nudging you toward repentance. Sometimes the memory is not a longing. It is a lesson. A reminder from heaven that love is not a game, that hearts are not toys, and that every relationship is a space where God is either honored or ignored. When she remembers you at midnight, it may be because the divine imprint you left behind was never dealt with. The spiritual weight of what was left unsaid or undone still hovers in the silence. Because where love was once real, God was present, and He still is. There comes a time when memory turns into a mirror, and in that mirror we see not just what we did, but what we failed to do. She remembers you at midnight because that hour strips everything down to truth. There are no distractions, no crowds, no noise to drown out the echo of what was left unfinished. And in that quiet space where the heart beats louder than the clock ticks, comes the whisper of regret. or the cry for reconciliation. You may not be able to change what happened, but you still have a choice. You can run from it, bury it, blame it, or you can face it. Because midnight memories, while painful, are often invitations. They are not always curses. Sometimes they are sacred calls from God to revisit what needs to be made right. Perhaps you broke her heart, or maybe you just disappeared without explanation. Maybe it wasn't even what you did. It was what you didn't do. You didn't speak when she needed your voice. You didn't fight when she needed to see that she mattered. And now you're far away. Time has passed. She seems fine on the outside, but there's a reason she still remembers you in the quiet. Because the wound didn't close clean. The story didn't get its ending. And maybe she doesn't want it anymore, but her soul still wants peace. That peace may never come from closure with you, but it might come through your repentance, your humility, your prayer. You can't always go back to the moment, but you can bow before the God who saw it all and ask him to help you make it right, even if only in your heart. We often think healing belongs to the one who was hurt, but sometimes healing begins with the one who caused the pain. You don't need to broadcast it. You don't need to drag her name back into your present, but you need to own what happened. You need to ask God with a sincere heart to forgive you for what you said, for what you didn't say, for the coldness, for the abandonment, for the careless words or the confused emotions you never bothered to explain. Because when someone remembers you at midnight and you know that memory carries pain, it is not just a haunting. It is a summons to responsibility. God will not allow us to forget the people we wounded when he still desires that we grow into people who restore. She may never know that you prayed for her healing. She may never hear you say, "I'm sorry," but heaven hears. And that matters more than pride. Restoration doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply becoming the kind of man who wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Midnight remembrance is not the end of the story. It can be the beginning of redemption. If you caused the pain, you still have the chance to be part of the healing, not by returning to her life, but by returning to God and letting him shape you into someone worthy of the trust you once lost. She remembers you at midnight not always because she wants to, but because some stories don't end cleanly. Some people leave quietly, but their absence roars for years. You may not have intended to stay, or maybe you thought leaving was best, but something in her heart still holds a space you once filled. And that space aches, not with desperation, but with the weight of what could have been. Midnight becomes the hour of truth, where dreams and disappointments meet, where hope flickers even in the shadow of loss. And while you may have forgotten the details, her soul still replays them in the quiet, trying to make sense of it all. Not because she's stuck, but because unfinished stories have a way of circling back. But here's what you need to know. There is still hope. There is hope for healing, for peace, for restoration. Maybe not the kind that rewrites the past, but the kind that writes a new ending. And you may say, it's too late, or she's moved on. Maybe she has. But this isn't just about her. This is about you. About becoming the kind of man who learns from his scars. The kind of man who doesn't run from what he broke, but seeks the courage to face it with humility. Maybe the relationship is over, but the lesson is not. And God is not finished with you. He sees your midnight too. He knows the guilt you carry, the pride you hide behind, the questions that still haunt you. And he's not afraid of any of it. He's not ashamed of your past. He's just waiting for you to come home. Waiting for you to bring your regret, your silence, your anger, your shame, and lay it all at his feet. Because what she remembers may be pain, but what heaven sees is potential. You don't have to stay where you are. You can grow, you can change, you can heal. And in doing so, you can honor the memory of what once was by becoming the man you were always meant to be. Midnight remembrance isn't always about going back. Sometimes it's about going forward, but differently this time. With more wisdom, with deeper love, with genuine integrity. Let her memory be the turning point. Let it push you towards something greater than regret. Let it awaken in you the desire to become someone worth remembering for the right reasons. Because if she still remembers you at midnight, you better believe God remembers you too. Not for your mistakes, but for who you still can be. So what do we do with this midnight hour? What do we make of the ache that lingers, the memory that won't fade? The silence that still speaks her name? We don't ignore it. We don't numb it. We don't run from it. We face it. We bring it before God with trembling hands and an honest heart. Because if she remembers you at midnight, there is still a message in the memory, a holy echo calling you to reflection, to repentance, to redemption. This isn't just about what was lost. It's about what can still be found. Not in going back, but in rising up, in becoming better, in letting God take the broken pieces of what once was and shape them into something sacred. The midnight hour is not your enemy. It's your altar. It's the place where pride bows, where pain speaks, and where heaven listens. And if you will listen too, you might just hear the whisper of grace, not condemning you, but calling you to become a man of truth, of healing, of strength, a man who learns from the heartbreak he caused, a man who prays not to be remembered, but to be transformed, so that if she remembers you again, tonight, tomorrow, years from now, it will not be with sorrow, but with peace. Because the man she once knew finally became the man God always intended him to be. That's why she remembers you at midnight. And maybe now you will remember her too. Not with regret, but with purpose. Let that memory move you. Let it change you. Let it lead you home.